The book started off with an introduction talking about how the author, Sharon Mollum, was starting to feel like he had a disease. Later, he came to find out that he had hemochromatosis, and also his grandfather had the same disease. He also talked about how at first he did not know why, but his grandfather loved to give blood, and every time he gave blood, he felt like he was relieved and felt pretty good. Later, he came to find out that his father had hemochromatosis and also that he had hemochromatosis. To understand how such a disease was genetically inherited to him and what the possible side effects could be, he wanted to do more research about the effects of hemochromatosis and how one gets them and the possible effects. Thus, Sharon Mollum went out to do research and wrote this book to help explain to everyone, or basically whoever read the book, how such a disease can affect people in the long run and how one gets it and the effects and so on. Hemochromatosis is a genetic disease which is prevalent in people of European descent. Hemochromatosis is common because the gene for it is passed down from generation to generation. This disease takes place when the body is unable to detect excess iron in the body and continues to absorb it. When an excess of iron, which is highly nutritious to bacteria is able to feed off of it and in turn hurt our body. Hemochromatosis can also damage vital organs in our body. There are some ways we can reduce iron in our body. One common way is bloodletting, when we get rid of blood from our body, which decreases the amount of iron. During the bubonic plague, people who were diagnosed with hemochromatosis actually had a higher rate of survival compared to those who were not diagnosed. Those who were not diagnosed died because their lymph nodes would swell up and burst. However, those who were diagnosed survived because they had macrophages which lacked iron. Diabetes is caused by the inability of the blood to efficiently regulate blood sugar efficiently. The persistence of the condition and the fact that it's partly hereditary raise questions about its conservation in the human genome. During the Younger Dryas era, an ice age that took place about 13,000 years ago, diabetes could have provided an excess of sugar to be used as an antifreeze by the body to prevent the bursting of capillaries by water crystals that form at cold temperatures. A fine example to explain how excess sugar works as an antifreeze is the American wood frog. Wood frogs are able to survive extreme cold environments by concentrating sugar in vital organs and pushing water out to the extremities. Sugar prevents water crystals from forming and locks them to prevent them from damaging tissue. Individuals with diabetes tend to have a closer descendance with those populations that inhabited the areas most affected by extreme cold temperatures. What now accounts for 171 million individuals within the biggest killer condition in the world might have once proved useful to withstand the cold environments. Vitamin D and folic acid are essential to the body. Vitamin D stimulates the calcium and phosphate ions to be in the bloodstream, which in turn supports the structures of the bones in the body. Folic acid helps with DNA replication during the cell cycle and also with the production of specialized cells. We get our vitamin D from the sun, but it comes with a cost. As the sun hits our body, folic acid is broken down. However, the populations have adapted to sunlight by production of melanin, which protects the skin from sunlight. The ApoE4 gene also helps by bringing in cholesterol to the bloodstream, which maximizes the use of sunlight. The addition of cholesterol in the bloodstream can cause cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other problems. The Achu syndrome also is an adaptation that once helped, but now does not. Asians are unable to detoxify alcohol as well as other people, which causes them to turn red when they drink. Just like humans, plants have defensive mechanisms to protect themselves against predators. For example, plants have toxins to protect themselves. An example of a plant with a toxin is a chili pepper. The toxin in the chili pepper actually gives it its spicy taste. One type of plant are the fava beans. Many philosophers, including Pythagoras, warned people against beans, especially fava beans. One disease related to fava beans is favism. Favism is glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. Fava beans produce a lot of free radicals, which lack energy. People with phavism are unable to get rid of the free radicals in the body because of the genetic deficiency. Since the free radicals stay in the body and are energy deficient, they attack red blood cells, which cause them to burst. So the question is, that how is such a fatal disease present in over 400 million people? Shouldn't evolution have eliminated this gene from the populations? The answer is because favism actually benefits people in some ways as well. People with favism are more resistant to malaria. This is because malarial parasites do not like the red blood cells of people with favism and thus do not attack them. This is why favism is a fatal disease is common in people today. Chapter 5 talks about how there are many bacteria and viruses in the human body. Humans have almost 10 times as much foreign cells in their body than mammals. The chapter also talked about how some viruses go from host to host and do host manipulation. One example of this is the guinea worm. It finds a way into the body from open sores and enters when in water. Then it grows inside the body until it needs to find a way out. Other viruses, such as cholera, go through the same process, almost the same process. Virulence of among diseases is determined by how a virus goes from host to host. Cowpox is a disease that comes when one milks a cow frequently. The effects of cowpox are not that serious. Through research, it was discovered that those who were infected with cowpox were more resistant to smallpox than those who weren't. Smallpox is a way more serious disease. This is also when one has cowpox, the body produces antibodies which can also work against smallpox. Because of this, those who have had cowpox are more resistant to smallpox. Also, in the chapter, it talked about how only 3% of our DNA is coded for making cells. Only 3%. And also that a third of our DNA is just viruses. The chapter also talked about how jumping genes and how this can help us fight against disease. Almost a third of the children in America are either overweight or obese. This number has been rising rapidly in the past couple of years. Scientists say that children's rate of metabolism is determined on the mother's diet during her pregnancy. Scientists say that children inherit and acquire these traits from their parents, supporting Lamarck's ideas. After a study in 2003, it was evident that the mother's diet and environment has a great effect on the child. In the experiment, there were two groups of two fat yellow mice. The control group was fed a normal diet, and the experimental group was fed the normal diet along with vitamin B12. As a result, the offspring of the control group were fat and yellow mice, but the offspring of the experimental group were skinny brown mice. These results surprised scientists, especially because the DNA of the mice were the same. After some research, the scientists concluded that some of the genes had been switched off. This is a process called DNA methylation. This is when methyl groups attach to certain genes and switch them off, but do not alter the DNA of the organism. In the case of mice, the vitamin B12 had a methyl group which attached to the agouti gene in the mice and switched it off, causing the mice to not become fat. Continuing to experiment and test epigenetics and DNA methylation, scientists were able to create mice with superbrains and much more. This happened by adding a specific food or molecule to the mother's diet before birth, which turned on or off specific genes. For example, to create mice with superbrains, the gene to stop mitotic cell division in the brain was switched off, allowing cells to continue growing. In Chapter 8, the book talked about progeria, a disease that causes people to become old prematurely. Progeria starts its effect on people as soon as they are born, and is also very uncommon. Chapter 8 also talks about the reason why most people die. The Hayflick limit, which was created by Leonard Hayflick, states that our cells can only divide up to about 50 to 60 times before they die. There are some types of cells that do not have a limit to how many times they can divide, and they are called cancers and stem cells. The reason that cells have a limit to how many times they can divide is because telomeres are used up each time the cell divides and eventually runs out. Cancerous cells have telomerase, which makes countless amounts of telomeres, causing the cells to keep dividing without a limit. Also in the chapter, it talked about how talked about the savanna hypothesis. This states that as ancestral primates developed, they changed structurally and became humans. However, Elaine Morgan does not quite agree with this hypothesis. She believes in the aquatic apes theory, which states that as humans started using water birds, they actually they actually help children adapt so that they do not drown when being birthed into water. All in, Survival of the Sickest is a book that tells us basically why we need disease, hence the title of the book. Throughout the book, Sharon Mullum talks about how we need specific diseases which are harmful to humans nowadays through the process of evolution. He answers why there are so many diseases still around today because at one point it helped people survive. Eh, Also, the book talks about how diseases are beneficial to people in the past.